we are on chapter 5. We are working our way toward kind of laying the foundation for some principles in HR before we get into recruiting, selection, stuff like that. We actually have employees in the building or teleworking, whatever it is. This one is organizational relations and retention. So things like attitudes and motivation and performance and turnover and absenteeism, how we manage those things, how we think about those things. So we'll get into it, beginning with talking a little bit about performance specifically. So there's basically a function of performance. That is, performance on anything is always contingent on the 3 inputs. That is effort, ability, and support. Meaning if you have someone who has a ton of ability and they're well supported, but they never actually apply any effort, their performance is going to stink. If you have the person who's supported well, good coaches, good technology, good equipment, and they work really hard, but they frankly have no ability. Like, think of that like me trying to be the middle linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. Like, no matter how much coaching I have, no matter how hard I try, my size, my strength, my muscle twitch and fibers and bone structure, it's not going to happen. Like, I don't have the ability for that position. All of us are bound in some ways, right? But usually when we look at this, what ought to stand out is that support is something that managers can influence through how they treat people, of course. Ability is something managers can influence through how they hire people, frankly, hiring someone with higher ability. And effort is something, motivation is something that managers can influence, again, through how they manage people. So we'll spend a little while here talking about different ways that motivation has been viewed over the years. You've heard of some of them, I'm sure. We'll begin with kind of like a need theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, each of which has its unique strengths and its unique weaknesses. Some of them don't have a lot of internal validity or external validity, which means they can't be replicated, which means yeah, that's a neat concept from psychology, but I live on planet Earth and it doesn't really work like that here. Totally possible. So we'll get into it. Individual motivation. Motivation is just somebody moves to do something, whatever it is. I'm unconsciously motivated to move my hands, apparently, when I talk. So it's just usually a desire-driven aspect of usually the human mind that leads to human behavior. So 2 ways to look at this in terms of what are called content theories. There's need theory and a 2-factor theory. Let's get the next slide here. So you've probably been familiar a little bit with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that is it's based on the principle of satiation. People initially would try to get their basic physiological needs met: food, water, shelter, stuff like that. Nobody is really worried about who they're going to marry or becoming all they can be when they're starving. There's kind of the principle. So once the foundational needs are met, they're satiated, means they're completed, they're satisfied, then they'll move up to safety and security. Now that I have food and water and a tarp shelter, living off-grid in Alaska, I'd like a little bit of a bigger cabin with maybe a wall around me to keep the bears and wolverines out. So a little bit of safety and security. And then after that's established, pretty soon people get lonely. And humans are kind of designed for social connection. So belonging and love, and it kind of works its way up, self-esteem, to ultimately self-actualization. Pretty simple theory, very popular across the world. Everybody knows about this. It does have significant limitations. It's nice because it's simple, just not always particularly accurate. So one take off of this, you can see on the right there, is called the 2-factor theory. 2-factor theory, I think it's by Herzberg, basically argues, no, this isn't right. This can really be divided up into 2 categories. One of those categories we can call motivators. Motivators are simply things that motivate you. So we're motivated toward esteem and self-actualization. But if I'm in my job and you have a lunchroom or running water or bathrooms, I'm not all of a sudden super like, I'm going to go to work today. I'm going to work really hard because, man, they have electricity and the building isn't freezing. I'm going to work hard. No. It doesn't work like that. If those things are not there, it serves to demotivate. But having them doesn't actually motivate employees. So they call those hygiene factors, meaning if they're gone, like, I'm dissatisfied. But if they're there, I'm not more satisfied. I'm just like, yeah, they should be there. So to motivate people, you have to really focus in on the motivating factors, making sure the hygiene factors are there. So kind of two different angles of the same kind of principle. Those are content theories of motivation. In terms of a process theory, kind of explain how motivation works, there's a couple more we can look at here. And we'll roll through these generally quickly. I mean, motivation isn't a particularly complex concept, other than we know people get motivated by different things in different ways at different times on different tasks. Okay, so there's a handful of theories that try to hit each one of those kind of boundaries, or each of those domains of how and when and why people are motivated. So first one, content theories. Process theories is two big ones I want you to know about: equity theory and expectancy theory. So let's look at them. Equity theory is based on this human need for justice. Like if you're at the store and you see a cashier ring something up to some person, especially if they seem like they're vulnerable, they're old or young or something like that, and they charge them too much, probably what's going to be, I don't know if you'll say something, but what's in you is like, hey, wait a second, that's not fair. Like, that's not okay. Somebody took advantage of somebody else. So all of us have this like innate need for justice, which is usually why you think about with kids, right? It's built in. If I give my son my last cookie, and so he's eating his, when he's down to his last, I say, Corbin, you should give your last cookie to your sister Annabelle. And Corbin says, no, why? And I said, well, I gave you my last cookie. He says, oh, no, but it was different in that case. This one is different. So everybody has a need for justice, right? Until it negatively affects them, and then they kind of wonder about it. So that's what equity theory is based on. People want to be treated at work. Equity just means fairness. Are things equitable? It works like this. If I feel like I'm working really hard, that's an input, and I feel like I'm not respected for my work, right? That'd be an output. I'm going to be frustrated or dissatisfied, less motivated to work hard. Or if I work really hard, hoping for a promotion, and they give it to somebody who didn't work as hard or wasn't as good, I'll be like, well, then forget it. Like, I'm not going to keep putting in, a whole bunch of effort. So what we kind of look for is balance between inputs and outcomes. And we feel as humans, the more we put in, the more we should get out. If we're not getting out what we think is fair, we will stop putting in whatever the amount of effort that we were doing. This actually comes out in a lot of crazy ways. Like department stores, trying to say physical commerce, like Walmart, Target, stuff like that. There's a massive amount of loss through employee theft that happens. Much of that is traced back to equity theory. Well, hey, I'm busting my butt here. I'm only getting paid $9 an hour, so I deserve this. This is more fair if I go ahead and if I take something, or else the company doesn't really care about me. So I'm going to take an emotional health day, even though I'm not sick. I'm going to call in sick, stuff like that. So we try to balance it out. That's equity theory. Expectancy theory is a little bit more complex. Basically says there's a mediative process, which I don't need to explain, but how hard you work, your effort will depend on a number of things. One of them is valence. Do you actually want what you might get for working hard? So if I work really, really hard at Central, become a great professor, maybe they'll promote me to dean. Well, I don't want that job. I like my job, so maybe I'm not going to work as hard because I don't want to take on that responsibility. So you have to value whatever it is, right? The rewards that are out there. The other one is instrumentality. Do I believe that if I actually work hard, I will get what it is that I desire? So let's take this class for instance. Let's say you study really hard, just absolutely crush it for the first, test, quiz, whatever, and you bomb it. You just do miserable. When it comes around to the next one, you will be less motivated to study hard because you'll say, I don't see a connection between me studying hard and the outcome. I don't think that me studying hard is instrumental in achieving whatever the outcome that I want is. So if I wanted to highly motivate you, I would have to convince you, of course, that studying hard will lead to good grades, and the valence, you actually want those good grades. There is some practical aspect of this because it tells managers to keep two things in mind when you're motivated. Number one, money may not be enough. People value different things, and you have to figure out what each player on your team values and make sure that's kind of on the table. If it's on the table, they're going to be more motivated. If it's not on the table, then they're not. Second, you have to get your team to actually, each player on your team to actually believe that hard work, good performance will actually lead to those things that they want. So both of those are critical. Think of it like now we're using the academic analogy. That's fine. Think of it like let's go like cell phones. If I'm selling cell phones and I tell the employee, all right, if you sell 30 cell phones a month, you get a bonus of $2,000. Well, I'm making a few assumptions. I'm assuming, thinking that will motivate them to sell cell phones, right? The first assumption I'm making is, do they actually want $2,000? Now, most employees do, but maybe money doesn't really motivate that person. Number two, I'm also assuming the employee actually believes they can sell 30 cell phones a month. If they can't, if they don't believe they can, then I've actually just frustrated them, and it hasn't served to demotivate, not to motivate. That's expectancy theory. Some other facets I want to walk through really quick. A few of these: contract, satisfaction, commitment, engagement. So let's hit them. Psychological contract. This is the idea that there is an unwritten, sometimes often unsaid agreement between two different parties of how things are going to go. It's psychological. It's not a written contract. It's not even a verbal contract. It's just, it's in here in my head. Like I have this, how about this? When you logged onto this PowerPoint here this morning to watch this video, you had this assumption that I wasn't going to make fun of your parents. Why? Like, I never actually told you I wouldn't make fun of your parents. That's not written down in my syllabus. I guess it's implied, but you get the idea. You just assumed that when you came in. Why? Because that's just what you do. It's an agreement. And I also understand that, right? So there's this agreement that we have, and that works fine as long as both people have that agreement. And as soon as one of them does not have that agreement, it's easy to have a fracture in the psychological contract, which is a big predictor of turnover. So think of it like this. You go to work, you've been working on your job for 1 week, you make a mistake, and your boss unloads at you and yells at you and tells you you're a complete idiot. You're going to want to quit, right? Because there was an expectation. There'd be kind of a grace period here. As I'm learning the job, I'm not going to get laid in, I'm not going to get ripped on by my boss. They're going to show some patience, show some grace until I come up to speed. Now, if I've done this correctly for 10 years and I make the same dumb mistake, maybe that's different. But right off the bat, there should be a little grace. Or as an employer, if I have employees and they've been there for a year or two and I'm paying them well and I'm treating them well, say, hey guys, we just got this big shipment, this big order. We're going to have to work on Saturday, probably twice this month. I know that kind of stinks, going to pay for it, want everybody here. And people say, no, I'm not doing it. It's my Saturday. I'm going to be like, hey, wait a second. Like, I'm treating you well. I'm paying you well. This is a big deal to the business. There's an agreement here that at times you're going to go above and beyond to support the company, and at times the company should go above and beyond to support you. So it's mutual. Very helpful, especially with new hires, to sit down and clarify the psychological contract. Sometimes we do this with what's called a realistic job preview. Before we even hire people, we'll bring them in and say, this is what it's like. I remember my first job at Boeing, my first big boy job. I thought, man, I'm going to have my office. I'm going to have like a view of the mountains, although it's always cloudy, so you can't see it anyway. It's going to be great. And they brought me in as a realistic job preview, and they said, bro, here's your cubicle. All right? And this is the person you're sharing this 8-foot by 8-foot cubicle with. And all of a sudden, I felt less important. But what they were trying to do is say, like, this is reality. This is the job. I know it may not have been your expectations. Do you still want it? And the idea there is to refine the psychological contract to reduce turnover as a result of fracturing that contract. All right, job satisfaction. Do we care about job satisfaction? Yes, of course we do. We want happy workers. Is it the most important thing? No, absolutely not. Job satisfaction predicts job performance at about 0.25, which means about 5%, 4 or 5% of the variance. In some, people have this idea that if you have a very satisfied worker, that they're going to be more productive. No, it's not true. Actually, if you have a productive worker, they're more likely to be satisfied. There might be like a reciprocal relationship there, but don't have the conclusion that if I can just get people happy, they'll work hard and do better. It doesn't work that clean. But we do care about job satisfaction, It does predict turnover. It affects things like morale and just the work environment that people are in. It affects your ability to attract new talent. People come in and realize nobody likes their job. They're not going to stay. So it does matter. We like to track it. There's some things that we can do to affect it. Major components: adequacy of pay, advancement, supervision and coworkers, working with good people, being treated fair. But again, Tim Judge in his research would say the #1 predictor of job satisfaction is, do people have a cool job? Like, if you can design cool jobs, they're going to like it more. Some jobs are just not cool. The second one there is going to be supervision. Are they cared about? Are they invested in? Typically, they'll be more satisfied with their job. All right, moving on. I know some of this is quick, but they're not particularly complex concepts. Organizational commitment. So if the psychological contract breaks, you're more likely to see turnover. If people are dissatisfied, you're more likely to see turnover. And if people are not committed, you're more likely to see turnover. Organizational commitment is just like, do I agree with where we're going here? Do I like it? Is this a place that I want to be a part of? There's an interesting relationship between satisfaction and commitment. I'll give you an example. I was in Lincoln, Nebraska. I was getting my PhD, and my wife was working at Starbucks. She loved it. She liked the culture, she liked the environment, liked the people she worked with. She loved her job, and she quit her job. Why? Well, in this case, because she was more committed to me, which I'm really happy about. She was more committed to me than she was at Starbucks. So just because somebody loves their job doesn't mean they're actually committed to their job, and vice versa. You can have people who are highly committed to their job and they don't like it. You usually get that with more tenured employees. So I've been here for 15 years, and now I have this manager who's a total jerk. They're new. I'll have another manager in a couple of years. Am I going to quit? No. Do I like my job right now? No. But you committed? Yeah, I'm committed. I've been here long enough, right? I've seen this before. I'm still committed. So that's organizational commitment. Psychological ownership is not in your text. You don't have to worry about it too much. But the big idea behind psychological ownership is it's a two-edged sword. Psychological ownership means that the person feels like an owner. They're not an owner, but they feel like an owner on that particular area of work. So if I take a product development engineer and I say, hey, I want you to go design a new part for this space shuttle. It's going to be really cool, and I need to do X, Y, Z. And they pour 3 years into it. And I come in and go, okay, I like that part, but you made it out of titanium. I want to spray paint it orange because I think it would look cool. That person's going to look at me and say, no. Like, that's my part. That's my baby. I've poured my life into it. What are you hearing? Me, my, I. You're hearing they feel like an owner. And you, as a manager, you do have the right to come in and change stuff. But if you do, you're going to be stealing ownership. The person's likely going to be dissatisfied, certainly perform lower, and maybe even quit. So if you want to give ownership, which is a great idea, it's like autonomy. People feel proud of their work. They invest in it. Something to show kind of for their time. If you want to give that, it's great. Just remember, if you give it, it's hard to take away without suffering negative consequence. You can't just show up and go, well, it's the company's part. We paid for your time. I decide. Okay. There are consequences of that if you do. The last one, engagement. Engagement's kind of loosely defined. I mean, different researchers define it differently. Consulting organizations talk about it a lot. So it's got a kind of a broad definition. But think of it like this. Do people actually care about their job? It's not, do I like my job? Satisfied. It's not, am I committed to the company? It's no, like this, I am all in. This is rad. I think about this when I go home at night. I think about it when I wake up in the morning. So you can see it's engagement is great. I'll try to draw the graph with my hand the other way. It has a linear effect, but it's kind of an inverted U, if you will. So the more engagement, the better performance. The more engagement, the better performance. But at some point, if you're married to your job, you're going to experience burnout and just fall off a cliff, and not going to be a benefit to anybody. So do we want employee engagement? Of course we do. More ideas, more voice at work, more expressive, more complex problem solving. Like, it's great. Do we want everybody to be married to their job and love it more than their life? No. That's not a recipe for success. High engagement, not off the chart engagement. Some examples of engagement, you can see it there. One of them is putting in extra effort, which takes us to organizational citizenship.